You don't wake up one morning and decide to cut everyone off. There's no announcement, no dramatic ending. It starts with something small. You see a message notification. Your phone lights up. Your body reacts before your mind does. A subtle tightening in your chest. A shallow breath you don't fully notice. Not panic, just resistance. You open the message. You read it carefully. You even imagine what you could reply. And then your thumb stops. You tell yourself you'll answer later. Not because you don't care, but because replying feels like stepping into something you don't have the energy to hold right now. Later feels safe. Later feels distant. Later feels like control. But later quietly turns into silence. One day passes, then another. Then the weight of time itself becomes the reason you don't respond. Now it feels awkward. Now it feels too late. Now it feels easier to stay quiet than to explain why you were quiet. So you disappear again. You don't block people. You don't end things clearly. You don't even mean to hurt anyone. You just fade out. And what unsettles you is this. Part of you feels relief when the connection breaks. Not happiness. Not freedom. Just relief. Your shoulders drop slightly. Your breathing slows. Your mind feels less crowded. You don't cut people off because you hate them. You don't even cut them off because they hurt you. Most of the time, they didn't do anything wrong at all. What they did was get close. Closeness does something inside your body that's hard to explain if you've never felt it. When someone starts expecting consistency from you, your nervous system shifts. When they check in regularly, when they remember details about your life, when they want emotional access, not just surface conversation, your body reacts before your thoughts catch up. Your shoulders tense slightly. Your jaw tightens. Without you realizing, your breathing becomes shallow. You don't feel judged. You feel watched. Not in a threatening way, in a way that makes you feel exposed. You don't think, I'm going to cut them off. You think, I can't keep this pace. You think, I don't have the energy for this. You think, I need space. But space doesn't stay small. It stretches. It widens. It turns into distance. And before you realize it, the connection is gone. If this feels familiar, you can write me in the comments. You don't need to explain anything. You've always been sensitive to people, more than you let on. You notice changes in tone immediately. You pick up on disappointment before it's spoken. You sense when someone wants more from you emotionally, even if they never say it directly. This sensitivity isn't loud. It's quiet, constant, and it makes relationships feel heavier than they look from the outside. People might describe you as independent, self-sufficient, low maintenance. They might admire how you don't rely on anyone, how you seem fine on your own, but they don't see what it costs you to stay emotionally present. There was a time in your life when being connected meant being alert. You learned to read the room. You learned to scan faces and moods. You learned to adjust yourself so things wouldn't get worse. No one needed to say it out loud. You felt it. Things went smoother when you asked for less, when you stayed quiet, when you didn't make your needs visible. So you adapted. You became the person who could handle things alone, the person who didn't complain, the person who didn't add emotional weight to anyone else's life. That skill helped you survive, but it also taught your nervous system something very specific. Connection requires effort. Connection requires vigilance. As an adult, that lesson didn't disappear. It just changed form. When someone wants regular communication, your body tightens before you can explain why. When someone expects emotional consistency, your mind starts searching for an exit. Not because they're demanding, but because closeness feels like something you might fail at maintaining. You don't leave people because you don't care. You leave because caring feels risky. There's a fear underneath your silence, a fear you rarely say out loud. What if I let them in and then disappear anyway? What if I disappoint them without meaning to? What if they need more than I can give? So instead of waiting for that moment, you remove yourself first, quietly, cleanly, without confrontation. There's guilt in this, even if you don't show it. You think about people months later. You remember inside jokes. You replay conversations when you're alone at night. You wonder if they think you didn't care. And that thought hurts more than you admit. But reaching out now feels impossible, because explaining would require vulnerability. And vulnerability feels unsafe. So the guilt stays. Not loud, not dramatic, just constant. Over time, cutting people off starts to feel normal. Not dramatic, not painful in an obvious way, just normal. You build a life that doesn't require much emotional access. Your routines are predictable. Your days are manageable. You don't depend on anyone too deeply. And no one depends on you in ways that feel overwhelming. On the outside, things look stable. You're functioning. You're responsible. You're getting through life. But underneath that stability, something is missing. Because cutting people off doesn't remove your need for connection. It only pushes it into places you don't visit often. You still want to be understood. You still want someone to notice when you're not okay without you having to explain it. You still want closeness that doesn't feel like work or performance. But wanting and trusting don't move at the same speed for you. So you live in between. Not lonely enough to reach out, not connected enough to feel fulfilled, just distant. There's a moment that repeats itself in your life more than you like to admit. Someone reaches out after a long silence. They say they miss you. They say they hope you're doing well. For a brief moment, warmth spreads through your chest. Your body softens slightly. You feel seen. You feel remembered. And then fear follows immediately after. Because replying means reopening. Reopening means expectations. Expectations mean staying. So you don't answer. Later, you tell yourself it would be strange to reply now. So you don't answer then either. That's how people slowly turn into memories. This pattern doesn't stay limited to friendships. It shows up at work. You may leave jobs suddenly when expectations grow. You may pull back when responsibility increases. It shows up in conflict. You go quiet instead of speaking. You shut down instead of explaining how you feel. Not because you don't have words, but because you learned early that expressing needs could make things worse. So you protect yourself the way you always have, by stepping away. Here's something most people never stop to consider. You didn't cut people off because you're cold. You didn't cut people off because you don't care. You cut people off because closeness asks you to stay emotionally present in ways you were never taught how to do safely. You were taught how to endure, how to adapt, how to stay composed, but not how to stay emotionally available without burning out. Your nervous system learned that relationships can shift suddenly, that emotional demands can appear without warning. So you learned to leave before overwhelm arrived. Distance became your way of staying regulated. This isn't about weakness. It's about protection. Only near the end of this pattern does something begin to change. Not all at once, not dramatically, just a quiet shift in understanding. What if cutting people off wasn't proof that you don't need anyone? What if it was proof that you needed safety before connection? What if your system wasn't rejecting people, but protecting itself from overload? This doesn't mean forcing yourself to reconnect. It doesn't mean reopening every door you closed. That would feel unsafe. What matters is noticing the moment right before you disappear. The tightening in your chest, the urge to withdraw, the thought, I can't keep this up. That moment isn't failure. It's information. It shows you where your limits are, where connection turns into pressure. And slowly, those limits can change. Not by forcing closeness, not by pushing yourself to be more open than you are, but by allowing yourself to stay present just a little longer than before. If this resonates, you can leave one word below. Anything you want. Cutting people off once kept you safe, but safety and isolation often feel the same at first. In the next video, we'll talk about the quiet guilt that follows after you disappear and why even when no one is angry, you still feel like you've done something wrong, because this feeling never exists alone.